commissioners for any comments or questions. Commissioner Severson.
Thank you, President Cogill, for recognizing me. I got quite a few questions and concerns. Just because Mr. Pedersen gave us that presentation, I'll start with him. I heard you specifically say we're getting wetter and hotter. With that, I guess my question is how much water are we currently pumping? And are we within the permitted amount that the DNR gave us?
Chair Meyer, Commissioner Severson, that's a good question. We ran the numbers. We're at about 230 million gallons so far this year. So that's January 1 through the end of June. That currently is under our permitted amount.
I'm sorry, my phone had cut out. Can you say that one more time?
As of June 30, so exactly 6 months of pumping this year, we're up at about 230 million gallons so far.
And what is our amount allocated by our permit from the DNR?
We recently bumped it up because it wasn't quite as high. I can't recall the new number, but it was originally 308 million gallons per year.
Okay. I had a few conversations with Senator Champion today, and he wanted a note for the record, and he specifically asked me to ask this question. It doesn't appear that our legislative delegation supports this. Specifically, he wanted me to ask if Vice President Vita would share with our board the conversation that she had with the legislation delegation, which included Senator Champion, Senator Torres Ray, and Council Vice President Jenkins. If she would be willing to share a little bit of what happened per Senator Champion's request, that would be great.
Commissioner Severson, you can continue your comments. If Commissioner or Vice President Vita wants to speak at another time, she can do so, but you can continue.
Oh, great. All right. It was just a courtesy that I was extending for Senator Champion. So a few questions. So we're going to spend $43 million on this project. Superintendent Bangor, have we ever spent $43 million on a project? Has there been anything close to this kind of impact that the Park Board has spent?
President Cogill, Commissioner Severson, I don't know that offhand. I am not aware of that. I would have to defer to Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, but I'm not aware of a $43 million project that I'm aware of at this moment. Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, do you have any feedback that you can give to Commissioner Severson?
Superintendent Bangor, President Cogill, and Commissioner Severson. Actually, as we look at our master plans, most of them spend in the neighborhood of hundreds of millions of dollars. If we look at, for instance, the Southwest Service Area Master Plan, I'm sure that number exceeds $300 million that we'd be spending in those neighborhood parks. So as we look at all of our master plans, we project the total cost. All of them have costs that are in the many millions of dollars as we look at implementation. It's important to look at implementation occurring over the horizon of the time of the master plan, which we project as say 20 to 30 years. So as we look at that, we are receiving funds consistently through the regional park dollars and other allocations from partners, which would, in this case, as Tyler Pedersen noted, forming partnerships with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District and the City of Minneapolis to implement aspects of this project that are important to their goals as well.
But Hiawatha is one amenity where the master plan is many amenities, correct?
The master plan would be part of the Nokomis Hiawatha master plan, if I'm understanding your question correctly. And that plan too has millions of dollars of improvements attached to it.
Okay, so have we ever spent $43 million on one amenity?
That's what I understood.
If you're asking about what we're spending money on, I don't know that we could calculate the dollars that we spent on one amenity because we typically continue to invest in those properties over time. I don't know if I can fairly answer your question, Commissioner Severson, because we're not implementing everything at one point in time, and we're proposing that there would be several amenities as an evolution of this property.
So maybe Council Rice can help answer this question with his historical knowledge. Council Rice, have we ever spent this type of money on one amenity?
Mr. Chair, our President, Commissioner Severson, the one that comes to mind would be the Central Riverfront. That involved acquisitions, parkway, transformation of property. You know, if you take Boom Island, B.F. Nelson, Nicollet Island, Father Hennepin, that could be that big. The most recent one would be Waterworks. I mean, that was 18 million, 18 to 20. That was a discrete building.
Have we ever spent $43 million in North Minneapolis on one amenity?
I mean, North Mississippi Park was probably in the magnitude of around 20, maybe, with the Croning Center. Okay. There is the Upper Harbor Terminal plan that's being contemplated. I think all of those we had. Yeah, a lot of that was state funding or combination of things.
What are the chances our legislation delegation would support something like this?
Is that directed to me? Or
probably. President Cogill, I guess, wouldn't allow me to ask the question per Senator Champion's request. So he also said you were in on the call. What kind of welcoming did you get from our delegation around this possible project?
Mr. Chair, I wasn't, Commissioner Severson, I was on a call with Commissioner Vita. I was at the delegation when we had the legislative meeting earlier this year. I mean, I think all the commissioners were there. This was a topic of discussion at that meeting.
Can you remind us of what that, what was your take from them on this?
I think that all the commissioners could form a judgment. There were a lot of questions about this project from the delegation. So I think like anything, this hasn't risen to a legislative request yet. And I don't know that Mr. Schroeder would be more familiar with the plan about how to finance it, whether this would go to the legislature or not.
Well, that's my next question. Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, how do we pay for this? I want to get you on record before I dive into the document from the Hiawatha Golf Course Area Master Plan. How do we pay for this?
President Cogill, Commissioner Severson, the master plan outlines that we would have a series of potential funding partnerships that we would look at. I mentioned the Watershed District and the City of Minneapolis as two. It's possible that we could have funding from other sources as well. We haven't pursued those at this point because we have no master plan. I also wanted to just, as I had a chance to thank Commissioner Severson after your question about have we spent a significant amount of dollars, and with some help from others in the planning staff, it's noted that when the parkway system was reestablished or reinvigorated in the 70s, it could have been, if we look at it in 2022 dollars, that might have equaled or even surpassed the 43 million, and that is a single a single amenity that runs through the whole system. If we could look at the dollars that would have been involved in dredging Rice Lake to create Lake Hiawatha in today's dollars, it certainly could have approached that when you look at for that single amenity. And then as we look at what we will eventually be doing with the park that evolves at Above the Falls, where we have a commitment of, I think, $12 million to date, we'll likely be investing $40 million or more in that park as it gets completed.
So one cause of concern for myself, if my fellow commissioners my colleagues have not had a chance to read the master plan. I think on page 35 raises a lot of concerns and questions, particularly the fact that $20 million, a little more than $20 million will be coming out of the general fund to support this. And the rest would be coming from the enterprise fund, which is, I mean, I'm really concerned at the point where.
Severson, could you wrap up your comments? Your time is up.
Oh, I didn't know this was time sensitive. How much time am I allocated so I can make sure I start my watch on this next time?
It's the same as it's always been. You have an initial comment period, and then you get a second time on any item.
And then, and how much time is that?
The first one, and it's 3 minutes for the first one, and the timer is right behind me on my screen.
Okay, I must have missed that. So there's a chunk of money coming out of the enterprise fund, which it's very confusing for me because the enterprise fund seems to be failing and just holding on by a thread and actually becoming possibly more successful because of golf. But we're going to take the enterprise fund, which golf is supplying, to take over this course, which may not turn a profit, which then again will put golf in the red, and then we'll turn around and say we don't need golf courses, or we'll have some type of leadership in the planning department that wants to kill golf, and which will turn around and say, hey, golf is dead, we need to get rid of this. So I mean, I feel like, are we setting this up to fail here with this? I must say, it's just a huge concern, and it sets a precedent that I'm concerned about. Are we going to fund North Commons and everything that was included out of our general fund or the enterprise fund?
Commissioner Severson, as I mentioned, you're over your time. You can raise your hand again to be recognized a second time. I'm going to move on to the next speaker. I see that we have Commissioner Bourne's hand raised.
Thank you, President Cogill. I have a couple of staff questions. I then have a motion. Over the 6-some years that we've been working on this, we talked ad nauseum about flood resiliency. A few months back, we started talking about climate resiliency. We also had a representative from the DNR say that we had to start preparing amenities for drought resiliency. And I'm wondering about the years of planning this amenity to be flood resilient. I'm sure it is climate resilient, but if we're looking at right now in the midst of a drought, we can have a grass fire, but if we're reintroducing native trees, native species, and reforesting there, what kind of like wildfire mitigation risk plan is in place that if you could turn in the master plan, direct me to where our safety plan is for wildfires as we're reintroducing a forested area in the middle of a residential area under this plan, and like I said, I'm sure that this design is as drought resilient as it is flood resilient, but if staff could just point me to where on the plan I would find that safety plan, that would be great.
President Cogill and Commissioner Bourne, this plan doesn't have a safety plan. That would be a logical element to implement as we move beyond a master plan into actual implementation.
Okay. But there's a flood resiliency plan, but not a drought not a drought resiliency plan, if I'm understanding that right.
President Cogill and Commissioner Bourne, the key issue here is ecological resiliency, and what we're doing, you pointed several times to flood resistance. There is the potential for flood resistance on this property because it exists at an elevation lower than Lake Hiawatha. When we talk about pumping, we're pumping groundwater and stormwater. We have no limitations on the amount of stormwater we pump, but we are pumping groundwater, and that's been a question for us because we have not been permitted until recently to pump groundwater. Tyler Pedersen noted that we're pumping about 230 million gallons of groundwater so far this year, which is within our permit. That has had to be raised in the past few years, even since we've got our temporary permit to be pumping water, which the DNR would allow us to maintain until some resolution to this master plan. If we were to continue pumping, even at a lesser rate, we're likely to exceed the permitted volume, even the adjusted permitted volume, by the end of the year in a drought year. So as we look at ecological resistance, we're not only looking at flooding, we're looking at the potential groundwater intrusion onto this site. If we stop pumping, this course will be inundated by water.
I'm not entirely sure that was my question, but I do appreciate the response. You know, just to echo Commissioner Severson's points about the $20 million in the general fund, the partners that we're talking about are in the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe, to a $40-some million project. We've robbed the general fund for enterprise things before, and it's always ugly. It's always ugly. It's swing sets we're not funding. It's wading pools that we're not funding when we take something from enterprise and take funding from the general fund to support it. So we're really screwing over neighborhoods and kids with that. This is the best plan I've ever wanted to not vote for. Golf is on the decline. There are some environmental pieces. As golf is declining and the market consolidates and retracts, Hiawatha will only become more and more and more profitable until we reach a tipping point where golfers are no longer with us, and that quote about golfing is very true, that there's just not enough golfers out there to sustain any courses. Hiawatha is always going to become more and more viable until that's done. So, you know, I do want to vote for this plan. I don't want to rob the general fund. I would offer a motion to suspend the rules for the purposes of amending the Hiawatha Master Plan to include a contingency clause for staff to begin implementation, dependent on the plan securing a dedicated $5 million per year for an 8-year implementation levy from the Board of Estimate and Taxation that does not impact current or future levies of the Minneapolis Park Board, and a subsequent dedicated, non-duplicated $500,000 annual recreation levy for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for 20 years to replace lost revenue from fees collected at Hiawatha.
Commissioner Bourne has made a motion. For clarity, Commissioner Bourne, was this entered ahead of the meeting 24 hours before?
This is a motion to suspend the rules to consider.
Understood. I just want to understand that the motion hasn't been provided in writing to any commissioners.
That is correct.
Okay, this is the first we're hearing it, but you'll provide it in writing, maybe email it to us so that we can look at it.
I'll provide it to the secretary. I can read it again too.
Very good. So the motion there's been a motion made to suspend the rules for the purposes of considering the motion that Commissioner Bourne just read. Is there a second?
Second.
There has been a motion and a second for the purposes of considering suspending the rules. Is there any discussion on the suspension of the rules?
A discussable item.
Oh, okay. I will have the secretary please take the roll on suspending the rules.
Commissioner Bourne.
Aye.
Commissioner Musich.
No.
Commissioner Severson.
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer.
No.
Commissioner Hassan.
Aye.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney.
No.
Vice President Vita.
No.
President Cogill.
No.
You have 4 ayes, 5 nays.
That does not carry. Commissioner Bourne, you did use up your time for your first speaking portion. If you want to raise your hand again, I will get back to you. Our next speaker is Commissioner French.
Yeah. Commissioner Severson and Commissioner Bourne talked about numbers and the capability of doing certain things. I want to talk about what this place means to certain people. Talk about the history. and talk about what people could and could not do in this place. Also want to talk about how, progress in the search for progress has destroyed many Black communities throughout this country. But there was a neighborhood in Minneapolis, just like throughout the country, that was slated to be destroyed in the guise of progress. That was Prospect Park in Minneapolis. Very affluent, very intelligent neighborhood. A lot of UNM professors lived over there. The highway was slated to go through that neighborhood and that community and destroy that community. White folks stood up and said, "You're not going to destroy our community. You're not going to take down our community." They had power, they had the ability to organize, and they had influence. Every city in this country, every major city where there's a large Black population, had to listen to white people say, "Hey, we're going to make progress here by destroying your community. We're going to make progress here by taking what you love and care about and destroying it. And we're going to build something better there." Time and time again. I haven't played a round of golf in my life, but when I got Black elders calling me saying, "Please don't destroy something that means a lot to us." White folks have a tendency to, once they believe this is the proper thing to do, this is the right thing to do, everybody else, they can be indifferent to everybody else's plight. And don't get me wrong, being environmentally conscious, protecting our watershed, these are all good things to be doing. But why do it have to be at the expense of what Black folks care about? Why did it have to be at our expense? I've had so many calls in the past 2 weeks from Black elders in this community saying, "Please don't tear this place down." I've had people call me and say, "Hey, my dad used to take me there when I was a kid. This is the only place we could go. This is the only place we could afford to play at." And that's so many memories. But when it's near and dear to Black folks, we need progress. Gotta make the environment okay. Gotta make sure that the water's protected. White folks been screwing up the environment for hundreds of years, thousands maybe. Don't use progress as a way to destroy something that's really meaningful to Black folks. Don't do it.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Vice President Vita, followed by Musich.
Thank you, President Cogill. Commissioner Severson asked a question earlier of me, and I don't know, but I think he's talking about the legislative breakfast we held earlier this year. Specifically, he asked about 3 people, and I don't want to go into like all 3 of those persons' comments because I don't remember them. But Senator Champion, not only at that breakfast, but many other times have had conversations with myself and other people on this board, and said that he supports the history, the 18 holes, that, what he's hearing in his office is that people who look like us feel like something is being taken away from them. And like Commissioner French, I've received these calls for not only 2 weeks, but the entire time that I've served on this park board. I thought I was doing a good job at bringing some amendments forward, that failed the last time, that would honor the legacy and the history of the Black community. While we have a unique chance to do that, this opportunity doesn't always come up. We don't always have an opportunity to change the name after a golf legend, or we don't always have the opportunity to create a system-wide golf program that centers Black and brown children, that creates a future for them in golf, and not just as golfers, because as some have said, golf may be a dying sport. I don't know. I don't golf. But what I do know is as long as we have a system in place, as a Black woman who sits on this board, I thought it was important to create legacy through finance and not just through seeing Black and brown people out on that course. So the idea of a training program, the idea of, the concessions, being led by Black and brown folks, that meant more to me than golf. Because like I said, I'm not a golfer, I don't know. But it is clear that that golf course means a lot to a lot of people, the way that it is, on top of all of the other things that I have proposed that were, you know, back in April that failed. I had the pleasure of meeting with two of Solomon Hughes' children last week at the clubhouse. It was literally the highlight of being a parks commissioner, to hear the history, to see them in person with their father's golf bag and shoes and hat, and show me all these programs and tell me all these wonderful stories. We scheduled an hour and ended up being there for 4 hours. So as I said, it was a highlight of my career being on the park board. This has been tremendous. Like this golf course has been, I mean, it's consumed so much time for us on the park board. It is really, it's been a lot.
Thank you, Vice President. Commissioner Musich, followed by Commissioner Severson for the second time.
Thank you, President Cogill. I have a question for Assistant Superintendent Schroeder regarding how long the course was not available for play after the 2014 floods. I know we partially reopened it the second season, but how many golf seasons were impacted by the last flood in this location? And if you want to pass it to Mr. Pedersen, it looks like he might be ready to answer it as well.
President Cogill and Commissioner Musich, I will pass it on to Tyler Patterson.
President Cogill, Commissioner Musich, thanks for the question. Yeah, in June 2014, we had 11.36 inches of rainfall. June 19, just basically middle of the month there, the whole course closed. That fall, the front nine opened, and which was less impacted by the flood. And then spring of 2016 was the opening of the full course, so the back nine opened spring of 2016.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. And under the new master plan that's being proposed here, how long of the season would be impacted after a flood event?
Tyler Patterson, again, could probably provide the best answer to that question.
Thank you.
President Cogill, Commissioner Musich, with this, we are planning to have the 9-hole course be able to shed that water quick enough to open within days or a few weeks.
Okay, and I assume that that's driven by how long it takes for the water to get out of the full watershed and allow this property to drain. But we'll get more into that in the detailed engineering documents. Is that accurate?
President Cogill, Commissioner Musich, that is accurate. Right now, we're at a very conceptual level, looking at feasibility. As we start to actually dive much deeper into water management here, exactly how groundwater flows, the extent of that. We would also be looking at engineering the topography of the area to best shed that water effectively.
And under the conditions in 2014-15, when we had the flood problems that closed the course, what was the loss to the enterprise fund related to the restoration of this site during the time that we were unable to operate it as a golf course?
President Cogill, Commissioner Musich, I guess I would defer to Michael Schroeder.
And Commissioner Musich and President Cogill, I think I would have to defer to Director Wiseman for a specific amount on how much was lost during that period.
President Cogill and Commissioner Musich, I don't have that off the top of my head. I could pull up our history and reply in just a couple minutes if there's other questions you want to go to.
Thank you. I don't have additional questions at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. Commissioner Severson for the second time.
As I sit here and think about the robust debate that's happening, I wonder, what would Solomon Hughes think about this, of this plan? And I don't know that answer. Does anybody know if his family supports this or his children support this? Have they sent anything in support of moving forward with this or standing against this resolution? Anyone?
Yeah, I can answer if you let me, Mr. President.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hassan.
Thank you. Commissioner Severson, yes, I think Shirley Solomon's daughter was on the line. She wasn't able to get in, but I don't think none of the family is in support of it. I think if Ms. President lets in, she can speak on behalf.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Hassan. I appreciate you trying to recognize and getting them in earlier and our president failing to let them in, because I think that would have a huge impact on this resolution. I'm a bit baffled and hurt by the commissioner from District 1 who put on social media that he thought that I was something in the words of the worst person on this board when it comes to environment. And the environment is extremely important to me. I live less than 6 blocks from Northern Metals, and we know what Northern Metals has done. And to our community, it's decimated it and caused a lot of health concerns.
Commissioner Severson, if you could wrap up your comments.
Yep, but with all due respect, sometimes I see progressive policies supersede. I don't want to say people of color. I want to see African Americans, Black people directly, and poor folks, and that's just, it's concerning to me. I just want to say, as a white American, it's particularly concerning for me when white people stand up and say this is what's best for African Americans. If you've done that this evening, I think that you have some soul searching to do. I'm okay with you saying that this may be best for the environment, but I think we've said enough about what's best for the African American community. I think there's a time and a place where we don't do that no more. And I hope that moving forward, that we don't do that starting tonight with this resolution.
Thank you, Commissioner Severson. Commissioner Bourne for the second.
Thank you, President Cogill. I feel really strongly that something like this plan should pass someday, but not today. The board has voted this down once. We have a divided TAC. We have a divided delegation. We have a divided board. We have no money. The plan before us doesn't address the drought conditions that we're living in now, and the DNR just told us a few months ago in their last visit to us that we needed to prepare for. And on top of that, it's an emerging and becoming a more visible civil rights issue to more and more of us. I talked about money just a couple of minutes ago, and I heard Commissioner French speak, and I got goosebumps. It reminded me a lot of conversations that this board had and I led around installing a dog park in Martin Luther King Park when I first got on this board. I was a kid and I grew up fast, and I could have got the votes to put that in. It was about the easiest campaign promise I could have delivered. I had elders in the community come up and say to me that simply because you can do a thing does not mean that you should do a thing. And I think the votes are probably here to pass this today. I think a board of children will pass this today, and not a board of adults. when you have
Commissioner
a marginalized community, excuse me, President Cogill, I'll finish in 1 second. When you have a marginalized community speak to a government body that ignores them so long, so often, and so much, and are speaking to us so loud, we have an obligation to listen. I've never seen a bigger project that has the least amount of consensus come through this board. If a board of children wants to pass this tonight, more power. I hope a board of adults will consider working on this a little bit more, and I won't be supporting this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner Bourne. Commissioner French for the second time.
Yeah, I have a question. How does the $46 million that's planned for this project affect our equity matrix? Is that in line with our equity matrix if we're going to spend $46 million on the south side? No one can answer that question.
President Cogill and Commissioner French, as we look at this, we can do an assessment of that as we move forward because we are addressing this in a regional park. We do have regional park equity metrics, and one of the factors that we look at is access. So this is adding more access to basically 160 acres of regional park that has relatively limited access today. So we could look at those numbers and provide some hints back to you. Director Arvidsson is showing up here, and he may also have some sense of how that could work more directly.
President, is it all right if I add one note to that comment?
Would that be helpful, Commissioner French? Director Arvidsson, go ahead.
President Cogill, Commissioner French, the timing of allocations in the regional park system would be guided by the equity metrics. So any expenditure of regional dollars into this park would happen when this park's equity number comes up. So it would still be prioritized against the other parks in the system according to the equity metric. And in the regional system, Nokomis Hiawatha ranks in the bottom half compared to some other parks. And in general, because there are fewer regional parks, each regional park does tend to see an allocation about every 6 years, which is more rapid than obviously the many more neighborhood parks. So it wouldn't be so much that this investment would affect the equity metric, it would be guided by the equity metric in terms of its timing and prioritization.
And then, a lot is full. This will only do that after we approve this, right? Basically, it's my understanding, right? Is that when it goes through the equity matrix process after approval?
Director Arvidsson, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. President Cogill, Commissioner French, Nokomis Hiawatha Regional Park is already in our equity metric, and any items that are in its master plan are eligible for expenditure, especially primarily under the regional dollars that we receive. Golf courses are not currently eligible to receive any regional funding. So under this plan, there would be more land area in Nokomis Hiawatha that would become eligible for regional funding. However, those improvements, as you correctly state, would not be eligible until a master plan is adopted by this board and by the Metropolitan Council.
Okay, thank you. I just got one more comment. The comment is about the concessions and the vendors that will be, that's something that should have been done anyway. So I don't think that if we're saying that we can't we either have an 18-hole, we either have a 9-hole, or name the concessions or give the concessions to a black vendor, we can do both. We can have an 18-hole and still have black vendors. We can do both. So I just want that to be on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French.
Mr. President, I had my hand raised.
I see that. Commissioner Hassan, for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was hoping to see the numbers add up for the vote, and it looks like it's a long due project, a plan that needs to be done, and it's a historic place. I talked to Shirley, Solomon's daughter as well, and the family. I do respect the historic aspect of this plan, but I don't see. Well, I mean, we do. And are we gonna take some money from our youth programs, enterprise? I also talked to the legislative delegation as well. I don't see where these numbers are coming from. I mean, I do remember when I was the chair of my neighborhood, Finjera Village, it takes partners to make project happen. And I don't see that happening. I do see a board that's divided as well. When we had the Phillips Aquatic Center that came in, it took the neighborhood, the county, the state, and the park board to have the first indoor swimming pool. So I don't see a plan that's well put together. I mean, I do see the plan, but I don't see the numbers. And I don't want to offend, the community that I represent and everyone because of a lack of plan. So I hope, we can get those numbers fixed. And we do also have union members, union employees that work there. I mean, we can't even keep our park keepers. So where are we getting this money is what I want to know. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner Hassan. I'm just going to briefly speak. I mean, I want to say a couple things. This has been a long process, and the intent in bringing this back for consideration is really out of respect for the public's time over the last many years to address what is a problem that's not going to go away. Presidents before me, including former President Bourne, could have shut down this entire process at that time, come up with a different process. But here we are. We went through an entire engagement process that was well outlined by staff that included a community advisory committee that was established by this same board. And we came out with recommendations. And not only that, we are facing the truth, whether or not we want to accept it, that we have major climate change coming our way. It's not going away. We are looking out right now at a hazy Minneapolis environment due to the burning of forests far north of us. And those kinds of crazy environmental phenomenon are not going to stop, and the projections for rain water are not going to go away. And what does that mean for that site? It means if we don't take action, maybe not tonight, but soon, we won't have a golf course to protect. There won't be an historic place to golf at or recall the history of. And I think if we're talking about a responsible approach, the time is always right to take a first step. We know that the funds are not there. No one's saying that they are. There's no dollars allocated. What this does is responsibly respond to the reality that this site was formerly a massive swamp. That's not going to change either, no matter what kind of human engineering is done and the number of decades of investment to shift the reality of this space. It's going to be a swamp. My perspective is if we want to honor the cultural histories, the converging cultural histories of this space, we need to take an initial step to acknowledge what the future reality of this space is going to be. It's the responsible thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do, but I am going to be supporting it this evening. With that, I'll ask Vice President Vita to speak second time.
Thank you, President Cogill. I just want to lastly say that, You know, when I came into this process, I came in it thinking from an environmental lens. Definitely, I've witnessed the flooding. I've rode my bike through the flooding in that area. So my initial approach was about how do we make the space better. But over time, I really found out that, you know, Solomon Hughes was a civil rights hero, the civil rights hero of his time. He fought to golf in that space. He fought to also, you know, go in the clubhouse and eat a sandwich. His kids talked about how his wife packed him a lunch every day because he couldn't go into the clubhouse and eat a sandwich, and because he, you know, and how he sat outside with his friend, his golf partner, and ate a sandwich. And they also said, you know, we love a sandwich named after my dad in the concessions because he had a specific sandwich. But I will tell you, as a Black woman who's seen history be erased, who has watched civil rights heroes' legacy be torn apart, I can't do that. I can't be the Black woman who sits on this dais and say, Solomon Hughes and his children don't matter, and all the hundreds of maybe even thousands of Black people who have reached out to me about this. Like, our history matters. If it's a golf course, it's a golf course. I can't say where history matters to people at. This is so hard for me because I really did want outcomes for everyone. But it's like, as a Black woman, the history, it matters to me. The legacy, the civil rights, what he put into even being able to step on that soil means so much to me.
Thank you, Vice President Vita. Not seeing any other hands raised, I will ask the Secretary to please take the roll.
Commissioner Bourne.
No.
Commissioner Musich.
Aye.
Commissioner Severson.
No.
Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Hassan.
Yes.
Commissioner French.
No.
Commissioner Forney.
Aye.
Vice President Vita.
Pass.
President Cogill.
Pass.
Commissioner Hassan.
Pass.
Commissioner Hassan, you're going to have to vote. We're not going to just go through again.
Second time.
We're just going to go around one more
You're going
time.
to pass for a second time, President Cogill.
Vice President Vita.
Pass.
President Cogill.
Pass.
Commissioner Hassan.
No.
Vice President Vita.
No.
President Cogill.
Yes.
You have 4 ayes, 5 nays.
That does not carry. Our next resolution, Chair Meyer.
Move Resolution 2021-250, a resolution suspending board policy and procedure and naming the clubhouse at Hiawatha Golf Course and any replacement of the clubhouse at Hiawatha Golf Course to be the Solomon Hughes Clubhouse.
The resolution has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
The resolution has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I believe we do have Shirley Hughes here if she wishes to speak to this renaming. Is that the case? I don't know, Commissioner Hassan, if you got that connected or not.
Sure, I can do that.
In the meantime, I'll see if anybody wants to comment on this item. Vice President Vito?
Yes. Secretary Ringgold, can we pull those pictures? Did we get those pictures? Let me see. So as I said, last week I had the opportunity to sit down with Solomon Hughes Jr. and Shirley Hughes, who are 2 children of golf legend Solomon Hughes Sr. They specifically said that we should make sure that the clubhouse says Solomon Hughes Sr. because there are 3 Solomon Hugheses, and they don't want anyone to think that the son or the grandson are the golf legends.
Mr. President, we have it on the line.
Okay, go ahead.
Commissioner Hassan, okay.
You can go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll come back to Vice President Vita. Sounds like we have the daughter of Solomon Hughes, Shirley Hughes, on the line.
Go ahead and speak. Can you mute the TVs?
Commissioner Hassan, this is not, we're not able to hear this. We might need to have somebody in the AV team connect with Shirley to get her call through. So we'll have to work on that. Again, Commissioner Hassan, we can't hear, and I wouldn't want to do a disservice to Ms. Hughes.
Can I work with Jennifer? And go ahead, Commissioner Vita can continue speaking. I'll text Jennifer the number.
Vice President Vita, go ahead.
President Cogill. So as I said, I got to spend time with the Hughes family last week, and they had specific, requests for the name change, and they're very excited that the board took this step. It's something that they've wanted their entire lives. They shared photos with me. We had a really good time. They shared photos with me with their father, who actually taught Joe Louis and Sugar Ray Robinson how to golf. They showed pictures with their father and Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. He was a huge civil rights pioneer for golf and really didn't even know it. They talked about how he came home from hard days at golf and never really put the pressures of it on them. They didn't know what he was faced with every single day on the golf course. They also talked about, how the very last, when he was sick and getting ready to pass away, he was at Methodist Hospital and he was overlooking Meadowbrook Golf Course. His daughter was able to take him out, and he explicitly said, I don't want to see Meadowbrook, I want to see Hiawatha. So she brought him out, and she brought him to Hiawatha, and he was able to see Hiawatha before he passed away, and that meant a great deal to him and to his family. They're just powerful humans. They are working so hard to keep his legacy alive. They brought along his golf bag. I put a picture of that in there, Jennifer. There was a picture. They brought his golf bag, his golf shoes that were super great quality. I mean, they were like from the 40s, but they were still well put together, and his hat, and shared many stories, as I said, about, they even bought a lot of his golf scorecards. He was actually a pretty good golfer who scored 2 hole-in-ones on the 8th, I believe, at Hiawatha. So they also asked that we put, that he was known as Saul, and that's his bag. His son talked about how he made clubs himself. He had tools and everything in the basement, and, he did the work to fit himself, and his son brought some tools and, some old articles from the first Negro League golf tournament. I encourage us all to, spend some time with them to understand the history of their family. And so many, because it wasn't just Solomon Hughes. Had it not been for Commissioner Musich, I thought Solomon Hughes was Ed Solomon for a long time because Ed Solomon golfed at Hiawatha too with the black churches. So I was confused, and Commissioner Musich told me, no, you got it wrong. There's 2 different people. And so I would just encourage us all to spend some time with this family and really just understand how the history of this has shaped their lives, have shaped the history of golf in our entire city of Minneapolis, and how many wonderful people came to Minneapolis and Hiawatha in particular to golf with Solomon Hughes. Thank you, President Cogill.
Thank you, Vice President Vita. Thank you for all the work that you did on this really important resolution. I'll ask staff one more time if we're working on getting Shirley to speak, or if that's not something that's going to happen.
I've given the phone number. It doesn't sound like she's able to use it. So
okay.
I'm not certain what the next right step is on that.
Okay.
Jennifer, the number works. You just got to wait until it goes through. Like, give a minute. It does work for me.
President Cogill, maybe if we put her on speaker on a telephone in this room, as opposed folks do in the room that Commissioner Hassan is trying to do it from?
I'll rely on staff's recommendation of how to do the AV since I'm not the AV expert over here.
Let me actually. Hello, this is the Minneapolis Park Board.
I'll reconvene the board in a moment.
So that you can be broadcast. 1 second.
All right, I'm reconvening the regular meeting of the board.
All right, here you go.
And it sounds like we have Shirley.
Commissioners, and good evening. I'm Shirley J. Hughes. I'm the daughter of Solomon Hughes Sr. I'm here to represent our family, including my brother, Solomon Hughes Jr. I'm sorry we've had so much technical difficulties, but I want to speak that we very much would like your support to name the clubhouse at Hiawatha Golf Course after our father. He was a quiet trailblazer and elite player who helped to end segregation and restrictions of racial discrimination in professional golf. In the 1930s to 1945, our father won all of the tournaments as a professional in the United Golfers Association, which was a league for black golfers barred from playing in then segregated PGA. In Minneapolis, Hiawatha was the closest course to our South Minneapolis home. So he joined the African American Twin Cities Golf Club as a pro. He frequently taught lessons at Hiawatha, and my brother Solomon Jr. often caddied for him, and he certainly remembers Hiawatha becoming his home course. While Hiawatha was one of the few public courses in the 40s that allowed blacks to play on the court, as you've heard before, they were barred from entering the clubhouse. Finally, in 1948, our father, Solomon Sr., was the first to ask and to demand that the Hiawatha Clubhouse be open to blacks. I would just like to mention a few other notes about his legacy and passion for the sport. I think it's been mentioned he achieved 2 holes and 1 on the 8th hole at Hiawatha, one in 1966, the other in 1967, for which we still have the trophy. He taught golf to numerous Twin Cities players of all races, and certainly to famed boxer Joe Louis, who became an Upper Midwest amateur golfing champion and came to our home in Minneapolis. Solomon Sr. also won numerous Midwest champion honors. And in the 1950s, he attempted to desegregate the St. Paul Open, which was a PGA-sponsored tournament in this area. After 2 to 3 attempts, he was finally successful in being able to enter that tournament. Our father's rich history and achievements have been documented in Minnesota Historical Society, Minnesota Journal, African American Golfers Digest, Minnesota Spokesman, and the book, The Journey of African Americans in Golf. In addition, I know his legacy has been brought to your attention by others when you conducted a series of hearings back in 2018. Not only has the Hiawatha Golf Course played a pivotal role in the life of black golfers, but certainly having an 18-hole golf course has allowed it to be the home course for aspiring young high school golf teams and reachable and affordable sport to those who could not afford to live or to join private clubs. The Hughes family strongly supports Hiawatha remaining an 18-hole course. Since, as Daddy mentioned, 18-hole courses always provide the ability to hone the game. But I'd like to just leave you with one last comment to demonstrate how much our father loved Hiawatha Golf Course and how much passion he had truly for the game. The last week of his life, he was in Methodist Hospital, suffering from a rare form of leukemia, for which there was no cure. His bed happened to look out over Meadowbrook course, which was one of the courses of many that he had played in the Twin Cities. But that week, our oldest sister got permission to take him out of the hospital for a day. So when she did, she asked him, "Daddy, where would you like to go?" And he said, "I want to go to Hiawatha Golf Course." When they arrived, he wanted to see the front nine. Now, our oldest sister, Tony, was not a golfer, so after they looked at the front nine and walked around, she thought it was time to journey on. But he said, "Oh, no, I want to see the back nine." It was then that she realized how much not only did he love the game of golf, but that Hiawatha was truly his home court. We would certainly be honored for support to name the clubhouse after Solomon Hughes Sr. I thank you for listening, and we also, as a family, certainly are supportive of it remaining an 18-hole course because of its legacy, certainly among African Americans and other Southsiders. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. I'm not seeing any other hands raised on this resolution. Thank you again, Vice President, for all your work in bringing this forward. And I'll ask the Secretary to please take the roll.
Commissioner Bourne.
Aye.
Commissioner Musich.
Aye.
Commissioner Severson.
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Hassan.
Aye.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney.
Aye.
Vice President Vitoff.
Aye.
President Cogill.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That carries. Chair Forney.
Was that the motion to suspend the rule, to suspend policy, and we have to take a vote to name the clubhouse?
I'll ask to, thank you, Council Rice. So do we need a motion then to?
The motion just to name the clubhouse, and I believe it should be Solomon Hughes Senior Clubhouse.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to rename the clubhouse at Hiawatha Golf Course to Solomon Hughes Senior Clubhouse.
The resolution to change the name of the Hiawatha Golf Course Clubhouse has been moved and seconded. Is there any additional discussion? Commissioner French?
I do want to make sure that the honor and respect the wishes of the family who clearly stated that 18-hole golf course would honor their family member. So I just want to make sure that that's known and that's on the record. So
Just for clarification, the existing resolution actually suspends board policy and names. So I'm not certain we need to, okay.
Well, we have another resolution before the floor, so I think we can vote on it again.
I think
right?
so, I just to be safe.
We'll go ahead and vote on it again. I will ask the Secretary to.
clarification, what are we voting on right now?
The name change.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bourne.
And there was a clarification that it's Solomon Hughes Senior.
Yes.
Thank you, President Cogill. I don't want to get in the path of the motion maker or the seconder. Hearing the seconder's expression to make sure that the Hughes family's wishes are forever memorialized, would the motion maker or the seconder have an interest in also naming the 18th hole after Solomon Hughes Sr.?
I would. I would like to talk to the family first.
That would be a really good way, like, maybe we don't do it tonight, and I'm happy to vote along with this tonight, but that would be a really good way to preserve that legacy of an 18-hole course, as if the 18th hole was named after Mr. Hughes.
hands raised. I'll ask the secretary to take the roll.
Commissioner Bourne,
Aye.
Commissioner Musich,
Aye.
Commissioner Severson,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hassan,
Aye.
Commissioner French,
Aye.
Commissioner Forney,
Aye.
Vice President Vita,
Aye.
President Cogill.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes.
That carries.